Welcome back. South Korea's military is apologizing for its failure to shoot down North Korean drones which crossed into the South's airspace a day earlier, pledging to secure anti-drone strike capabilities. Kang Shin-chul, a senior official at the Joint Chiefs of Staff (JCS), said the drones, each measuring about 3 meters, were too small to easily intercept. The military also said it could not aggressively attack them because of concerns over civilian safety and pledged to improve anti-drone capabilities, including strike assets, jamming and radar technology, and also regular air defense drills. Meanwhile, residents of South Korea's capital, Seoul, are expressing concern over the incursions by North Korean drones that crossed into the South's airspace. Now, 5 North Korean drones crossed into South Korea Monday, prompting Seoul to scramble fighter jets and attack helicopters. Now, with South Korea's military failing to shoot down any of them, the incident rekindled questions about South Korea's air defenses at a time when it is trying to rein in the North's evolving nuclear and missile threats. Kim Ji-won, who lives in Seoul's district where one of the drones was spotted by the military, she said she thought Seoul's military response was insufficient. The Serbian army says it is at its highest level of combat readiness after weeks of escalating tensions between Serbia and Kosovo. President Aleksandar Vučić says he will take all measures to protect the people and preserve Serbia. The saber rattling is louder than ever and follows media claims that Pristina is preparing an attack on ethnic Serb areas in North Kosovo. However, the government in Pristina has made no comment about the allegations, but it has previously accused him of playing games to stir up trouble. In the meantime, the EU has been attempting to mediate with the 27-member bloc, calling for maximum restraint and immediate action, and for the leaders of Serbia and Kosovo to personally contribute to a political solution. Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen says it will extend mandatory military service in the country from 4 months to 1 year. Speaking at a press conference today, President Tsai announced new plans to bolster Taiwan's defense in the event of an attack from Beijing. According to her, peace will not drop from the sky, and Taiwan is on the front line of authoritarian expansion. President Tsai said conscripts will also undergo more intense training, borrowing some elements from the U.S. other advanced militaries. She adds that the island's current defense system is inadequate to cope with aggression from China, which has one of the world's largest and most advanced militaries. The Taiwanese army has shrunk since the early 1990s, when all men over the age of 18 were required to serve in the military for up to 3 years. Over the next few decades, service was shortened to 1 year and 10 months before being further reduced to 4 months. The new rule takes effect January 2024. The same month, Taiwan will elect its next president. Well, Chinese officials says that it will scrap quarantines for travelers from the 8th of January, marking the last major shift from the country's zero-COVID policy. After almost 3 years of closed borders, this will reopen the country to those with work and study visas or seeking to visit family. However, it comes as China struggles with the virus's ferocious spread. In the wake of restrictions being lifted, there are reports of hospitals being overwhelmed and elderly people dying. The true toll, daily case counts and deaths is currently unknown because officials have stopped releasing COVID data. Beijing had reported about 4,000 new COVID infections each day last week and a few deaths. Staying with the coronavirus, India has mandated a COVID-19 negative test report for travelers arriving from China, Japan, South Korea, Singapore and Thailand, days before Chinese authorities announced it would slash the restrictions for its inbound travelers. India's health ministry says passengers from those countries would be put under quarantine if they showed symptoms of COVID-19 or tested positive. China recently relaxed years of strict COVID restrictions and had seen a sweeping surge of infections across the country in recent weeks. Japan today also announced that travelers from China are required to show a negative COVID test on arrival. To legal matters, a court in military-ruled Myanmar will be delivering its final verdicts in cases against deposed leader Aung San Suu Kyi on Friday. This is according to a source familiar with her trials, wrapping up marathon proceedings that have been condemned in the West as a sham. Well, declining to be identified because of the junta's efforts to suppress information about her trials, the source adds that the court is scheduled to rule in 5 corruption cases against her, each carrying up to 15 years in prison. The 77-year-old was arrested when the military seized power February 1st last year in a coup that ended a decade of tentative democracy and plunged the country into chaos. She's being held in an annex of a jail with no access to lawyers other than on trial days, after earlier being kept under house arrest in an undisclosed location. And the death toll from Christmas Day rains in southern Philippines has risen to 13, with the search still on for 23 people as floods started to recede. Footage from the Philippine Coast Guard showed personnel evacuating residents across waist-deep water in Clarentown in Misamis Occidental province. Head of the disaster agency reports that rescue operations continue and damage to agriculture is being assessed. Most of the deaths were caused by drowning from flash floods after 2 days of heavy rains disrupted Christmas celebrations and more than 45,000 people to take shelter in evacuation centers. Similarly, heavy rainfall that hit the ancient desert city of Petra in Jordan is causing severe flooding in the area. Tourists have been evacuated from the site as water filled the gorge, turning it into a fast-flowing river. This footage was filmed by Mahmoud Rafat, a tourist, the moment he was evacuated from the World Heritage Site in a vehicle traveling at speed through the flood waters. Other tourists had used a different route because the route Rafat's group had taken was seen as too dangerous. Now, at least 28 people have died in western New York State, most of them in Buffalo, as a monster winter storm continues to batter North America. State officials say some people had been trapped in cars for more than 2 days during what is probably the worst storm of their lifetime. Meteorologists warn that up to 9 more inches of snow are expected in parts of the state today. The storm, stretching from Canada to Mexico, has killed 56 people in total. U.S. President Joe Biden has approved an emergency declaration allowing federal support for New York State. Or staying with the weather, freezing weather and recent blizzards on the east coast of the U.S. left Hope's Lakeshore restaurant in Hamburg, New York, covered in icicles. Restaurant owner Kevin Hoke says the storm started forming the ice on Friday. Holt adds that the temperature had dropped from 45 degrees Fahrenheit to about 12 degrees Fahrenheit. The blizzard, considered the worst Buffalo has seen in 45 years, formed late Friday and capped an Arctic freeze and winter storm front that has extended over most of the U.S. for days, stretching as far as south as also the Mexican border. Meantime, weather-related flight cancellations and delays that snarled U.S. commercial air traffic over the holiday weekend drags on, with Southwest Airlines accounting for the bulk of the lingering disruptions a day after Christmas. According to the flight tracking service FlightAware, more than 3,800 U.S. airline flights were cancelled Monday, including 2,800 operated by Southwest, or nearly 70% of the carrier's total scheduled for the day. The Dallas-based airline, one of the world's largest low-cost carriers, said it anticipated the disruptions would continue in the days heading into the New Year holiday travel period at the end of this week.
For weary Southwest passengers at Oakland International Airport, all signs pointed to a bad day. In its latest update, Southwest Airlines says it is working to
Away from the weather in the U.S., Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has received the credentials of Israel's new ambassador this afternoon, marking another turning point in normalizing ties between two countries after a 4-year-long deterioration in relations. Irit Lillian, who has been Israeli chargé d'affaires in Ankara since January 2021, officially became Israeli ambassador to Turkey after presenting his letter of confidence to President Erdogan. Once close regional allies, relations between Israel and Turkey have been strained for more than a decade, with Ankara having expelled Israel's ambassador following a 2010 Israeli raid on an aid ship to Gaza, which killed 10 Turkish citizens. Diplomatic relations were restored in 2016, but 2 years later, Turkey recalled its ambassador from Israel and expelled the Israeli envoy when Israeli forces killed a number of Palestinians who had taken part in protests in the Gaza Strip. An Israeli Prime Minister designates Benjamin Netanyahu has moved one step further towards establishing a government after Parliament approved divisive legislation agreed with his far-right coalition partners. Already facing criticism on policy before taking office, Mr. Netanyahu has vowed to govern for all Israelis, even as he will head one of the most right-wing governments in the country's history, with key ministries in the hands of hardliners. Despite a clear election win in November for his right-wing and religious bloc of parties, it has taken Netanyahu almost 2 months to reach deals with his allies, who have demanded a significant share of power in return for their support. We'll have more on that story shortly, but still to come on the program. The 22nd annual Roast Goose Digestion Run holds in Berlin, Germany. We have details when we return. Welcome back. More strikes are on the horizon in the United Kingdom as rail workers, postal workers, nurses, other union members are planning new industrial action throughout the year-end holidays and into 2023. The country has faced massive strikes over the past weeks by transport, postal workers, border guards, among others. All sides in the ongoing industrial disputes were trying to blame the opposing side for the chaos and disruption. Joining us to talk more about this, our London correspondent, Juliana Olainka. Hi, Juliana. Compliments of the season to you. I mean, has it been a happy, Merry Christmas in the UK with all of the strikes ongoing?
Good evening, Millicent. Season's greetings. I don't like to start conversations like this, typically during the festive period, on a gloomy outlook, but it has been gloomy, and I think it's been incredibly difficult for consumers and business owners here in the UK in the run-up to Christmas anyway, because, of course, one of the main topics of discussion this year in this country has been the cost of living and the fact that prices are 40 years higher than they were throughout this year, and the fact that wages are stagnating. So already it was a tough build up to Christmas. We know that Brits do like to plan, and many families had planned to the T their details of how they were going to spend their Christmas with their loved ones. And unfortunately, it just hasn't been the case. It has been complete and utter chaos across several sectors. So we're talking about postal strikes, we're talking about rail strikes, we're talking about those unprecedented strikes that we're seeing on our screens now of the NHS, the first time that they had taken industrial action in over 100 years. And there are so many more. There are teachers striking, binmen striking, and we are going to be expecting more in 2023. I think it has been a significant political gamble for Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, and the rest of his senior cabinet members not to negotiate with union bosses. I think what's happened here is the Conservative government have tried to pit union bosses against the public, saying, look, they're earning so much every year. They are the ones destroying your Christmas. They're the ones that you should blame. And I think if you're somebody that had to travel 6 hours to get to somewhere that could have taken you an hour, or you got to an airport with your 3 children and you were told you couldn't get on the plane, because there wasn't enough staff. Certainly, I think at that point you would blame the unions. But according to the latest polls, most people in the UK are backing the workers. I think most people feel pretty much the same way. They're sick and tired of low pay. They're sick and tired of working conditions, and they want things to change. And it just seems as if some are more braver than others when it comes to striking for change.
When it comes to what government said before, the raise demanded by workers is unaffordable, is that still the message?
It does appear to be, Millicent. Of course, government is on recess at the moment. They're all away for Christmas. Nobody is sitting and discussing this. But if we talk about the NHS, which I think is the industrial action that's really hit the headlines just because it was so shocking. Yes, emergency surgeries were still taking place, but the fact that the NHS is in pretty bad shape and nurses decided to walk out really is unprecedented. Now, the Royal College of Nursing, the union that is backing, I believe, these 100,000 nurses, are asking for a 19% pay rise. Now, if you think that inflation is about between 10 and 11%, that's almost double inflation. Steve Barclay, the health minister, as well as Rishi Sunak, has said it is unaffordable. Why? Because we're trying to bring down inflation, and they think by handing millions upon millions of pounds to public sector workers would mean people have excess money in the shop to shop with, and then inflation would go up. So it does appear as if they do have some sort of stable argument, but they are also advised by the Independent Pay Review Body. And we have heard on the airwaves from previous chairs of this Independent Pay Review Body saying that the government can renegotiate. You don't just have to have a fixed figure in your head and say we can never return to the negotiating table. Now is the time to do that. That's what the Labour opposition party are asking for. And I think that's really what the public are also asking for. You know, we were clapping for carers and nurses during the pandemic, but it's more than a clap. It's about having cash in the back of your pocket. We know that investors are wary about industrial action. We haven't had a winter of discontent as steep and as extensive as we have had since the 1970s. So certainly something will need to change in order for the country to get back on track.
And talking about cash, that is also needed for energy. And we understand that energy prices are going up. How are people coping this winter? If there's anything to go by with near what the US is going through?
Well, it is tough. We know that, the energy crisis isn't something that is only familiar to Britain. It is something that's happening around the world, but particularly acute to Britain, Millicent, because it is incredibly cold here. And just today, the Business Secretary, Grant Shapps, has launched this £18 million televised advertorial. It's a 30-second ad, basically advising Brits how they can not consume as much energy, asking people to do pretty simple things such as closing their curtains in the evening time to stop the cold air rushing in, keeping double layers on, not saying you want to put the heating on if you've only got a T-shirt on. And, some would say that's a nanny state kind of system, but some say it's good old common sense that needs to be reiterated to people who are really on the brink. I think what is going to be a big topic of discussion is what is the way forward. One of the only successes of the former Prime Minister Liz Truss is that she did, alongside her Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, put in place this energy price guarantee, which would mean that energy prices in this country are frozen at £2,500 a year. Not great if you look at what it was like this time last year, which was just about £1,000. But considering Ofgem, the energy regulator, was forecasting bills to be about £4,000 a year, that £2,500 has been a saving grace for some people. But it ends in April. What's going to happen at the end of April? Businesses too, they're on the brink. They're not protected by this energy price cap that households have been protected by, which is why we're seeing insolvencies going through the roof. So yes, we are still in the festive period. There are still a few more days unto the new year. So we do have some things to look forward to, but it is very, very difficult now. And some of the issues that we've been facing over these past couple of months don't seem as if they're going to be going anywhere too soon.
So, Juliana, perhaps are hoping for a Christmas miracle?
Millicent, we always hope for Christmas miracles. Again, I don't like to be too doomy and gloomy. I think one thing to say, particularly for our viewers watching in the UK, this is a great time to get a job. We know the labour market in the United Kingdom is squeezed. Vacancies are at a record high. So if you were thinking of changing your career or going into a specialised job, you can do that. Britain is still very much a member of the G7, and we know that they are changing migrant rules as well. So anybody that wants to jackpot, I'm not saying I encourage it, can. So things aren't all doom and gloom, but the economy certainly isn't where it was pre-pandemic, and there are going to be some serious tough decisions that the Prime Minister is going to have to battle with, shall we say, when he gets back into number 10 in the new year. But yes, let's not end it on too much of a sour note, and hopefully things will change.
Hopefully. Thanks a lot, Juliana, and enjoy the rest of the holiday. Well, the Yuletide season is also usually characterized by sharing of gifts, which is popular with days like Christmas Day, and then there's Boxing Day, of course. But then many people choose to give days before, even days after Christmas Day. But shopping for what to give has not been business as usual. Price of gift items have soared following inflation, supply chain disruptions, we understand occasioned by the war, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Well, here's more. Our business correspondent, Eni John Mekwa, brings us this report.
It's indeed the season to be jolly. In Nigeria, the season comes with exchange of gifts, mostly captured in hampers. The culture has grown so much that online markets create special platforms, which is most active at the end of the year, to allow ordering and delivery of hampers. Offline supermarkets have over the years positioned themselves to satisfy this demand. With inflation at 21.47%, a dollar exchange is officially at above 452 naira, but is not accessible at over 700 naira at the parallel market. Petrol, which determines transport cost, is being sold at well above the regulated pump price of 165 naira for a litre. These macroeconomic factors mean that the cost of living and operating businesses have skyrocketed. The act of exchanging hampers has not escaped this.
We are trying to make it cheaper by getting products that are cheap, and we add them all together and then we sell it. Like, for example, we have some 50,000 naira. Our profit is not that much. So we also try to make the basket available, because some people prefer to buy the goods themselves, the wrapper themselves, and then go home and then choose how they arrange the hamper themselves. So for the most part, we sell the already prepared ones. We also sell the basket, so that it makes people want to do the hamper by themselves rather than recharging them for the hamper.
In the open market, the picture is hardly different. Mrs. Davis, who always looks forward to a bumper sales at this time, is thankful for little mercies.
Things has really gone up, and you can't compare what is happening last year to this year. Last year, it was a little bit fair, but this year, it's not easy. Everybody knew it's not easy. It's not easy. It depends. The price varies from 20,000 upward. And before, we can see like 5,000 hampers, no matter you cut your coat according to your size. But now, you can't even get hampers of 5,000. It's not even possible. Even though 10,000 is not, I don't think you can.
I'm basically into giftings at Christmas.
Mrs. Omonike George Ayudu would normally have hampers set for delivery at this time. According to her, if she had been stuck in this line of business, she would have lost out on revenue.
We cater to those that would like to give to like the less privileged, so they ask us to pack for them. So we pack in 5 kgs, we pack in 2.5 kgs, okay, and we help them in terms of to seal and all that. And of course, we also do, now most of the vegetable oil companies, I don't want to mention names, most of vegetable oil companies, they now have some of them in sachet. That plays a very big role in terms of how all of those giftings would come. And of course, like I said, most of those giftings come in food items rather than proper amper where you would have to require imported items and assortments that may not be in the immediate need of the people.
Nigerians, like many others around the world, are barely clinging on to the gesture of exchanging gifts at this time. Hopefully, the economy will become more buoyant and the hampers will make a bigger return in 2023. Ini John Mekwa, Channels Television News.
Finally on the program, dozens of runners have joined the 22nd annual Roast Goose Digestion Run in Berlin, aiming to burn all the calories after holiday celebrations. Roast goose is a traditional Christmas food in Germany, served with red cabbage, kale, potato dumplings. With co-organizer Wolfgang Peach dressed as Santa Claus leading the group, a mock goose in his hands, they ran for 5 kilometers until they arrived at a small cabin where they were rewarded with mulled wine and pastries. Runners then got the chance to burn off those treats during their run back to the starting points, the same 5 kilometers away. Quite interesting. Well, that's our show this evening. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Walker.